Hey guys, so I'm just going to jump right into it and start talking about my experience and the kind of philosophy I have adopted over the last 10 years, having taught, and then what that means for the overall project that I've been working on. And obviously, I'll share some pictures during this video as well. So let me just jump into it. 10 years ago, I started teaching middle school art, and I was actually teaching at a math, science, and technology school. And so my whole thought process, like when you're a first green-eared teacher, is like, how can I do the best job I possibly can? And so what I ended up doing was, working really hard to create a curriculum that involved math, science, and technology to the best of my ability, so that these kids who came in on a daily basis into my classroom, but also into the school, and were taking these classes, would come into my classroom and see kind of the relevance of art in their daily lives. So my whole project really kind of revolves around cross-curricular, application for art, and how we can see maybe even like the windows to other subjects through the visual arts. And I always have considered art, the visual arts, as kind of like that connective tissue. I think I talked about that in my intro video. But yeah, no matter the class or the reception, I always had one goal, and that was to create a progressive and scaffolded curriculum that not only allowed students to be creative using the visual arts, but also left the students with a well-rounded understanding of the methods and techniques used throughout art history. By building upon previously learned knowledge and processes throughout the 3 years students had me as a teacher, students would progressively improve their technical ability and their artistic voices in the visual arts. The piece of artwork I have created represents a cross-curricular Venn diagram. The Venn diagram, a regularly used visual aid in most classes to represent the crossover between topics being covered in the current unit, shows the crossover of topics and information in the art curriculum I have developed. In it, we can see all the subject areas a student would usually take classes in during their time throughout middle school and even in high school. However, each subject area is represented by an artistic visual illustration. This example used in the image is one that I found could be used to access a student's artistic connection through my experience. So, using different kinds of access points. For instance, I talk about a lot of times math being in drawing and science being very apparent in color. Okay, drawing in perspective, for instance, it's a very formulaic process, and so when you ask a math student, for instance, to kind of understand these formulas and then use that process to draw, sometimes that itself is helpful in helping someone with a personality or a learning ability such as theirs to kind of pick up and then also build confidence in the subject matter. Okay. I really want to build that kind of confidence level as well, because it means a lot for someone, I think we all know, to kind of find something that is useful to them in the visual arts or just in arts in general. To make it more connective to your own life means that you become more invested in it, right? I want students to think of art as accessible to all, no matter their previous experience or exposure to it. I want them to think of visual art as a universal language, translatable and relatable only by sight. Intellectually, I want them to think of art as the connective tissue of intelligence, i.e., so that even when they are in science or math or English or computer class, they're using knowledge they've acquired in my art class. So here in my piece, you can see that I've set up, like I was saying, a Venn diagram of sorts, a little bit bigger than your normal Venn diagram. But the presentation is in a cave art style. So using very primitive visual language to kind of relay information that I think is important to understanding my philosophy in general. You can see, actually, I'm using a character some of you might be familiar with as well as kind of our guide through each one of these sections. That character, if you guessed it correctly, yes, is a little bit of the IKEA man, right? So kind of a play on that primitive art form, but also with a little bit of a modern twist. I'm sure most of us have put together IKEA things and have used something so simple as drawings, like computer drawings in a manual, right? How to put furniture together. And so he kind of guides us throughout this whole image as to these different elements that kind of create the important connective art tissue, right? And at the bottom of it, you can see near him where he stands, actually scaffolding holding these up, because I really do believe in that kind of scaffolded approach to teaching. So teaching in ways where, like, they build upon their knowledge year after year. It's not kind of just random art projects, but they're continuously doing something, and they're also repeating maybe small elements of things that they did last year, but then they're growing their abilities in that field as well, whether it be on a technical level or just with knowledge in general. In the first two you see at the bottom there, you see 1 + 1 = 2. That's pretty obvious to all, but the idea is that you're using the basis there is like a math component on the left and a social component on the right. And you can see that represented by the numerous heads in there, and also this element of a movie theater in the background, as well as music notes. So in society, in order to create, I feel a lot of times we have to do it collaboratively. Even in visual arts, which is a very solitary act, a lot of times, it only helps if you have ideas from others or concepts from previous artists, right? So that kind of collaborative element comes into play a little bit differently with visual arts, but it's still there, definitely. But math is a very important element, and I personally am not good at math, but I really appreciate the fact that at its base level it is very informative when it comes to the visual arts. On the right hand side there, you can see going up towards the top, actually that bubble to the right there is considered, for me, kind of language, our ability to communicate to one another, our ability to interact and kind of disseminate information to each other. And you can see that represented in books and scrolls, and then even binary code up there as well. So in a more modern version, you'd see it obviously on a computer and such. On the left side, you can see the element of science kind of starting to take place as well, represented by that crane. And then also some lines there that represent, angles and such. And you're thinking about architecture, you're thinking about also color theory when you're talking about science. You're thinking about, how colors come together, the science of color, right? Johannes Itten, if you guys are familiar with art history and all that, I use him a lot of times when I'm doing color theory units. And then at the very top, that's history. People pointing, or each one of these teachers pointing to a previous teacher, a previous person in our history as a species. And I think, once again, I'm just kind of playing on the idea of this kind of visual literacy, being able to understand when you look at something, what's happening in an image, because that is a language in and of itself. And I think that, we can use that language no matter what class we're occupying, what discipline we're using, whether it be math or science. And I think we've seen that a lot in recent years, last like 15 to 20 years. I feel like education has really kind of brought a lot of artistic practices into the fold, which I truly appreciate. But I also think vice versa, like we can bring, as artists, as teachers, art teachers, we can bring math and science into our classroom, which is a little bit, maybe, I don't know, controversial, if you will. But I really try to implement, the ruler, the protractor. I try to look at, even the scientific method when I'm covering something like color theory. And I think of, testing a variable against a constant when you're talking about like getting the right color. Yes, you're going to mess up, but it's all about trial and error. That's very scientific experimentation, right? And I think that making those disciplines relative or relatable to art is a really important thing to do. Anyways, that's my philosophy. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope maybe you can apply it to your teaching as well. I look forward to seeing your guys' take on this whole project, and I appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day.